Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Wilson. I'm with the Police Executive Research Forum, and we welcome you to our virtual call and discussion and webinar on measuring the impact of police accountability. So, Police Executive Research Forum is a think tank, a membership organization that's located in Washington, D.C. We do work on a variety of policing topics. That's our focus. And we do things that are management type work, where we work with individual agencies across the country. We do work for the Department of Justice, and we've been very fortunate to have a relationship for the last few years and working with the state of Maryland. And this is actually our third or fourth project that we've had the opportunity to do with the state of Maryland. Our third project, particularly on the Police Accountability Act. So we are going to walk you through the history of that and then what we're currently working on. And we've got our folks from PERF. We've got Rachel, Kristen, and Zoe, who are going to be our key folks. They'll take you through this webinar. But before they get started, I just want to introduce and give a big thank you to Marty Hammond from the state. And Marty has been a key person in this whole role. And Marty at the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention Policy has helped us work in this area and share this information throughout the state of Maryland. So a big thank you to Marty. Thank you for trusting us as an organization that in this partnership that we've created with the state of Maryland. And we hope that you benefit from today's webinar and the information that we've been able to provide on the Police Accountability Act. So Marty, please, thank you, and please give a welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome on behalf of the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. I'm honored to join you and want to thank PERF and all of you for being part of this important discussion. Like Tom said, since 2023, our office has had the opportunity to partner with PERF on previous PAC initiatives that have helped Maryland law enforcement agencies strengthen community trust. These projects brought together local agencies, national experts, and community voices, reminding us that meaningful progress happens through collaboration and not isolation. Beyond our PAC initiative, GOCPP and PERF have also worked together on efforts identifying strategies to reduce youth crime, highlighting innovative programs across the country that focused on prevention, engagement, and accountability. That work has definitely informed Maryland's approach to youth violence, diversion, and reentry, to include our office with potential strategies. So I want to thank them for that. So today's webinar is really an extension of our partnership and shared commitment. We're grateful to PERF for continuing creating these spaces where ideas, challenges, and solutions can be exchanged openly. So with that, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Marty. I'm Rachel Apfelbaum. I'm a senior research associate here at PERF. I'll be leading some of the efforts for this PACT grant, which we'll hear about shortly. But as Marty mentioned, we're also doing some work on identifying strategies to address youth crime. And we're lucky that the Maryland Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy has agreed to continue our work in that space. So we'll be providing technical assistance to Maryland law enforcement agencies and implementing some of those model programs over the next year. So please be on the lookout for a flyer about a webinar so you can hear more about that technical assistance and how you can access it. And it'll be no cost to you. So thank you. And I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Hi, thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. My name's Kristen McGeaney. I am also a senior research associate here at PERF. I have probably met several of you because I have been working on this PACT project, the measuring the impact of the Police Accountability Act project here at PERF for the past few years since we've been doing it. But for anyone I haven't met, thanks for joining. And just a little about myself. I have a background in law enforcement. I started my career as a police officer on a college campus in Maryland. I'm born and bred Marylander through and through. And actually, I have a brother with the Anne Arundel County Police Department too. So this project is near and dear to my heart, and I'm looking forward on working on it again this, winter and spring. And just really appreciate GOCAP's continued support. And I am going to pass things over to Zoe real quick to introduce herself and say a little bit about the webinar platform, but she's using my microphone, so you'll hear it through my computer.
Yep, my video's on, but hopefully you can hear me. Hi, my name is Zoe Mack. I'm a research associate here at PERF. I've been here for about 3 years. I assisted with the second phase of this project and am now helping with the third. But I will just walk through sort of quickly some of the functions of the webinar. I'm sort of helping on the back end. So most of these things we're going to talk about really quickly can be found at the bottom of your screen, but I'll just go through them. So the chat, this will be mostly used for me to post materials that are referenced throughout the presentation. The Q&A, feel free to put questions in the Q&A at any time. We will address these at the end of the webinar unless it's something technical that I can help with, throughout the webinar. So I will monitor it as we go. The raise hand function, again, at the end of the webinar, if you prefer to speak instead of putting a question in the Q&A, you're welcome to raise your hand and we will be able to unmute you. And then lastly, we will have a few polls pop up on your screen. This is not a function that you can see currently as an icon, but you'll see a little poll pop up every now and then, and you'll be able to answer that if you choose to, and then it'll disappear. So just look out for those. And then just a reminder that this webinar is also being recorded. So thank you. That's all I got.
All right, thanks, Zoe. So I want to share a little bit of project background just really quickly, so that we have some context going into talking about what is coming up next. So we've, I think, alluded to the fact that this project has been unfolding, step by step over the course of 3 phases now. We didn't initially plan that or know that that was going to be the case, but we've had the good fortune that since 2023, when we started this initiative, we've just had continued support from GOCAP to be able to kind of take a next step and build off of our previous work each time. So in phase 1, like I said, we kicked that off late 2023 and into 2024. That was a pretty global effort to identify issues, challenges, even like what has gone well, to the extent that it exists with respect to implementation of the Police Accountability Act. And then we documented that in a report that we published in, I believe it was June of 2024. That is the report with the red cover on your screen, and Zoe's going to pop that in the chat. So you have a link to it if you would like to look at it. And then building on that report and that project last year, starting last year and then into this year, we did phase 2 of the project, which was to kind of build upon the outcomes of phase 1, the challenges that we identified, but actually try to measure them in a quantitative way. So, we were hearing things like the timelines that are set out in the Police Accountability Act rules are not necessarily realistic. So we wanted to know, what are the actual timelines of how long these cases are taking to investigate, adjudicate, go to trial board, come to a final resolution. So that's the type of thing that we wanted to put hard numbers to, so we could understand across the state what the status was and not just be looking at kind of anecdotal evidence. So our outcomes from that project are in the report with the Maryland flag sort of cover, and I think Zoe just added that to the chat box now. I'm also going to pull up a poll question here real quick where Zoe is. We just want to do a temperature check a little bit to see, of the folks who are on the webinar right now, let us know, did you participate in either of these previous phases? Whether it was attending the meeting that we had back in March 2024 in Annapolis, if you provided any case data, or participated in focus groups earlier this year for our phase 2 project. All right, so Zoe is launching that right now. And if you don't know if your agency participated or you're not sure if you even did, that's totally okay. It's not a pop quiz. It's just, we just want to know for our sense of the kind of audience familiarity with the project. So I see some of those are coming in now. So just give it one more sec. Zoe, you tell me when you feel like it's ready to close. It's looking like for the most part, there are about a third of folks on the call were involved in both phases. So that's very cool to hear. Glad that you're still here with us. And there's a smattering of folks from that were involved in the others, or some that are maybe not sure, but thank you for that. That's really helpful. We can go ahead and end that and move forward. So just to talk a little bit more about phase 2, coming out of phase 2, going into what is now phase 3, this sort of grant cycle. I want to tell you where we're going, but in order to do that, I need to talk a little bit about where we were in terms of the sort of the process of the phase 2 project. So in phase 2, as many of you know, we reached out to every agency in Maryland. Here we go. We reached out to every law enforcement agency in Maryland to the extent that we knew that that they existed. That was 141 agencies. And what we did was request de-identified case data, so not including any kind of personally identifiable information about complainants, about officers or investigators, just looking at what the alleged misconduct was, and what some of the kind of key metrics of the investigation, when it was initiated, when it was forwarded to the administrative charging committee, if it was a PAA era case. And so we asked for, from each agency that participated, we asked for data from 2 years under the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights time period, and then 2 years of data, if it was available, under the Police Accountability Act kind of era of process, so that we can compare those. And a lot of the outcome of these of our analysis is really driven by the fact that we had some pretty significant limitations. So I want to talk about those. And that to say limitations, I just want to be clear that that's not something that is inherently bad or good. It's just facts, and they have an impact on how representative the data is. So the first limitation that we had was the amount of agency participation. So of the 141 agencies represented by these boxes on the screen, about 1/3 participated in providing data. So that was 51 of the 141 agencies, which is not bad, but we would love to have had more. So just know going into this discussion that everything that we're going to talk about is kind of tempered by the fact that we had data from about 1/3 of the agencies in the state. 6 of the 51 agencies that participated submitted what we call empty data sets or null data sets, which just means they responded and say, hey, we want to participate, we want to give you data. It's just that we have no cases that apply to the reporting period. And typically that is the very small or very specialized kind of agencies. And then there was one additional agency that was just a really unique outlier among everyone that participated in terms of agency size and kind of case volume. And so in consultation with that agency, we decided to analyze and present their data separately in the report. But aside from that one agency, all of the other agencies that we collected data from, all of that data is put together in one set and analyzed as a whole. There's no kind of breakdown of each agency individual, with the one exception. So anyway, all of that to say that the data that we have that is presented in the report is really based on 44 agencies that provided case data. So that is limitation one. Second was that there were, we sort of expected that there would be some differences in the types of data that we got. We were honestly kind of surprised, I think, by how all over the board it was. And I mean by that, there were a lot of differences across the state in terms of what type of data about cases was tracked, if it's tracked. How, what methodology it was, that the data, the case data is tracked with, meaning some kind of formal record management system, paper records, Excel spreadsheets, other stuff. And then the kind of phrasing or language used to describe different parts of the process or different elements of the case, like different types of allegation made that, one agency might use, this is my sort of standard go-to example, but one agency might use the phrasing unbecoming conduct, and another uses the phrase conduct unbecoming. And it's really talking about the same thing, but just in different kind of syntax. But where those standards were for each agency just wildly varied, which frankly makes sense, but it did present a lot of challenge in terms of making meaningful comparisons between agencies or across the state. And then kind of the final limitation that we primarily faced was just gaps in the completeness of case information that we received. And this kind of goes back to just every agency seems to do something a little bit different. So to illustrate this, we noted that there were kind of missing data in really, I think, every category of data that we had. Some cases that were reported to us, there were no specified allegation type. So a complaint was recorded, but there was no data that actually described what kind of misconduct was alleged to have occurred. About 1 in 5 allegations from the LEOBR cases and 1 in 3 allegations from the PAA cases had no reported disposition or kind of outcome about the findings. And half of the allegations from the PAA era cases had no disciplinary outcome reported. And I mean, at least for dispositions and disciplinary outcomes, again, that's pretty understandable and it makes a lot of sense because not all of those cases had reached their conclusion yet at the time that we were collecting data. So naturally, those just wouldn't have that kind of endpoint captured. But again, it's just sort of illustrative of some of the challenges that we faced with collecting and interpreting the data. So all of that to say, I'm going to sort of skip over any specific findings. You'll have to read the report if you want them. And again, Zoe, who's sitting right next to me, so I keep looking at her, she put them in both reports in the chat box. So the second, I believe she marked it as number 2. The second report that was published July of this year is the one that has our kind of more extensive findings, but that led us to these 4 recommendations that we included in our report. The first 2 really speak to those concerns about data inconsistency, both in terms of what is tracked, how it's tracked, and what we call things. And then the third recommendation was not something that we really expected to address in this report or in this analysis, but we noticed that it kept coming up over and over and over in our conversations with chiefs and sheriffs and other command staff folks, that the financial impact of the implementation of the Police Accountability Act's requirements was something that seems to be of high concern across the board. And so we felt like it was merited to include it as a recommendation for future research. And we will address that in a moment. And then, of course, number 4, the recommendation number 4 is really directed towards the General Assembly to revisit and revise the legislation in order to reduce the burden imposed on agencies around investigating minor incidents and sort of processing them through this very formal process. So things like the really low-level vehicle incidents that technically qualify for ACC review, but there seems to be a lot of consensus that ACCs don't want to review those things, and it is a burden for agencies to have to prepare them for the ACCs. So that then quickly brings us to where we are now, phase 3. And so this year in this round of funding, we are planning to tackle the 2 subjects that really came out that we have agency over from phase 2. The first is what we're calling phase 3A, which Rachel will talk about in a moment. That is to look at assessing the costs to agencies and their communities, because we recognize not all of the costs are exclusively shouldered by the agencies, but looking at the costs associated with PAA compliance. And then the second part, phase 3B, is to develop voluntary, I'm calling them voluntary statewide common language and data standards, which is a mouthful, but basically to try and get us all on the same kind of page about what we're tracking, what we're calling it, etc. So fortunately for you, I'm going to stop talking now. And my colleague Rachel will talk about phase 3A, which she'll be leading.
Thank you, Kristen. So as Kristen just mentioned, phase 3A will involve assessing the expenses and overall costs of complying with the PAA. As Kristen mentioned, we've heard from many of you that the costs can be really high and challenging for agencies to absorb. So the first part of this phase is really information gathering. So I've reviewed the prior PAC studies findings for possible costs associated with complying with the PAA, making a list of things like extra time for investigating, time for submitting things to the ACC, costs for having a victim advocate or somebody notifying victims at every single stage of the process, and things like that. So I actually want to ask you what some of the costs are that you're most often paying for. So a poll is going to pop up. That's what it's going to put on the screen. And I'll let Zoe determine when to end it so I can see the results.
All right, Rachel, we're looking at the results coming in. I'm gonna let it go for a couple more seconds because it looks like folks are still actively answering. like we have about 2/3 of the folks on that have answered, so we can go ahead and end that poll so we can look at the results. And if you have thoughts that you weren't able to add yet or sort of submit your thoughts in the poll, you can certainly add more thoughts into the chat box as well.
Okay, so it looks like 51% of you have said that increased investigator time over time is something that a lot of your agencies are covering, followed very closely at 49% by employee time submitting cases to the PAB, Police Accountability Board. Additionally, 30% are spending costs for time for agency representation at the Administrative Charging Committee. Many of these costs, again, are associated with extra time that wasn't spent before for investigations of employee misconduct. And then we also have a really high percentage at about 37% for costs for legal counsel to advise on PEAA matters, and then 46% for costs for an administrative legal law judge for a trial board. So this is really in line what I've been finding with the PAC study review, as well as of the very few interviews I've done so far, which brings me to the next thing I'm going to say, which is this is where I really need your participation. I'm going to be doing some interviews with select agencies to really help me refine this list. There's a lot of things that may have costs, but I want to refine it to determine what really does have costs and what those costs are. Putting some more tangible numbers on those costs as well. If I don't reach out to you, but you feel passionately about this topic, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will be on the last slide. And now we'll move to the next part. So part 2 is going to be data collection and analysis. So once the list is refined, I'll be putting together a data collection tool, likely a spreadsheet, and I'll be sending it out to all of you, asking you to fill it out with more specific numbers regarding the costs that your agency is absorbing. This will really help us assess the individual and overall costs associated with complying with the PAA. And this will really help us and the Maryland GCAP to really understand the budgetary impacts on Maryland law enforcement agencies. Another poll is now going to pop up to ask about the financial impact on your agency.
So while they are responding to that poll question, Rachel, and I see that folks are actively responding right now, I wanted to acknowledge that apparently we have disabled the chat for folks. I'm told that we can enable it, so we're going to do that. So if you did have comments that you weren't able to put into the chat, you should be able to do so now. If you had submitted comments or questions into the Q&A box, we can see those and we'll come to them. And it looks like folks have pretty much stopped responding to the poll, so I was going to end that, and you can take it away again, Rachel, to talk about the result.
Thank you so much for letting us know and the information you did provide in the Q&A regarding some of those other costs, such as an employee suspended without pay while going through the trial board process and other parts of the process is really helpful. I also appreciate the offer to have me reach out to you. We will be doing that. And so I'm also looking at the results here now. So it looks like for most people, it's there is a financial impact. For most, it's in the kind of 2 to 3 range, although there are some where it's a pretty unmanageable burden, and some where it's somewhat minimal of an impact. But we'll really be diving in more, both looking at kind of the costs for example, for investigator time, some of those employee costs, but also looking at, the administrative law judge portion specifically, so we can really get an overall picture. And then the last part, which we'll move to, is we'll be putting together a publication which we'll disseminate to you, the Maryland GCAP, as well as all the other stakeholders, with a cost inventory with all those individual expenses, as well as the data that we collected from all of you. And now I'm turning it back over to Kristen for phase 3B.
Yeah, thank you. So phase 3B, we'll be focusing on collaboratively developing voluntary common language and data standards. And that's really intended on addressing the issues of consistency around what data is tracked, how it's tracked, and what sort of language is used to describe the data. The goal here is really to facilitate this collaborative process in which you all, as a community of peers of Maryland law enforcement agencies, can try to build some consensus around data practices. Of course, participating in the development or actually adopting any of these standards is entirely voluntary, but we think that this process and coming to its endpoint of establishing some consensus standards will be a really important step towards being able to play off the same sheet of music. We're all kind of talking about the same thing, and be able to build up some good data-driven public policy in the future, meaning if there are legislative changes, you'll have good data to sort of engage with your representatives about, and be able to kind of track into the future in a consistent way, what that all looks like. So similar to phase 3A that Rachel just talked about, we'll kind of have this sort of information gathering, engagement, and then dissemination process. So I really hope for all of this to be driven the most by what makes sense to and is useful to you as practitioners that are actually working in these cases day by day, and for the exercise to have some kind of meaningful outcome for you. So to do that, we're planning on starting by going back to our phase 2 data to look at, again, the types of allegations, dispositions, discipline, timelines, etc. All the data that was reported to us, so we can start building kind of a taxonomy, if you will, of data points and their definitions. And in addition to looking at the phase 2 data, I have in my head kind of this sense of wanting to look at some agency documents that kind of define misconduct in your agencies respectively. But I'm going to ask Zoe to put up another poll, and this one's a open-ended one. You can either answer there or in the chat, but I'm curious, when a complaint is made, how do you make decisions about categorizing the allegations? So, for example, if a officer or deputy in your agency is charged with discourteousness, is discourteousness itself specifically defined somewhere in your agency policies, SOPs, rule guide, whatever it is that you call it? Is that defined somewhere, or are you categorizing it as discourteousness based on the fact that it's a violation of a policy on courteousness? Hopefully that difference makes some sense. But I'm curious if there are written materials that you have, not just talking about your general SOPs or policy manual, but is there anything that kind of your internal affairs, professional standards folks use as a kind of guide to what we are calling different allegations and what we are charging folks with, if that applies? So I'm pausing to let folks respond to that. And we can leave that poll open. You don't have to finish right now while I continue kind of moving forward. But to the extent that any of those materials exist, I'd be interested in knowing about them and reviewing them if possible as a part of building this kind of consensus around language and data. And hopefully I didn't lose anyone on that, because I don't know if that was super clear, but I will press on and hopefully it'll make sense. So after doing the kind of initial pulling the data from our phase 2 project, reviewing any kind of additional documentation that you may have, then PERF, me, Zoe, Rachel, will pull together sort of a rough outline of what we found, what data points are being tracked, how they're being tracked, and how they're defined, for lack of a better word, into sort of a rough outline. And then the real work is facilitating some discussion groups among y'all as peers to discuss who does what, why you do it that way, why you think it works or doesn't work, to hopefully kind of circle around, is there some consensus out there on what is a kind of agreed upon way to track things, what should be tracked, and what we call those things. So we'll be looking to you to ideally participate in those discussion groups as well. And then from there, we'll distill that all into kind of a final draft in writing that we can share and receive some feedback in writing on. That'll go to Marty and his colleagues. I'm sure we'll share that with folks at the Training and Standards Commission, maybe the Chiefs and Sheriffs Association, and any kind of other stakeholders that we think could have some good feedback on it. And then, as we've done in the past, as we'll do with the 3A results, we'll produce a final written publication that we'll make available on our website and circulate by email. So all of that to come to this tidy recap, that for phase 3A, we are looking to examine cost data about the financial implications, really, of the Police Accountability Act requirements. And for phase 3B, we're looking at data standards, what is tracked, how it's tracked, etc. And we're hoping to engage your participation in both of those to the extent that you are able to. Different folks from your agencies can be involved in 3A versus 3B. That's really, of course, up to you. But we'd love to stay in touch with you and have you continue to participate or start to participate in this kind of overall measuring the impact of the PAA project that we've got. So I will kind of pause here. That's our song and dance, and I'll put our contact up so that you can jot that down if you need it. But I will kind of pause here now and ask Zoe if we have any questions. Actually, while she looks at them, I am I just want to note, you can keep submitting questions in the Q&A box. You're welcome to keep using the chat box to add ideas or, thoughts or questions. You can also, as Zoe mentioned, there is a little raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, or there should be. If you want to ask a question out loud, that's totally fine too. Just hit the raise hand button and we'll call on you and allow you to unmute yourself and ask your question. So with all of that said, Zoe, are there any questions for either Rachel or I about either? Okay, let me see. Christopher Baez raised his hand. So I'm going to call on him. Zoe will find you and give you the... Oh, okay. I believe he put his hand down, so maybe that was a goof. A goof. Okay. Oh, thanks, Chief Morris. Said that we had 2 excellent reports so far, and I really appreciate that. We really put a lot of care and effort into documenting what we hear from you guys, and hope that it's useful for your work. And let me see. Any consideration of a deep dive into the disparate decisions across the state from the different ACC boards? That is a wonderful question. It's not something that we have planned within the scope of this project this year. I think that if we are able to do that work of building some consensus and agreement around what data is being tracked and how it's being tracked, we can ideally in the future receive some more funding that we'd be able to kind of replicate the work that we did on our phase 2 of the project. And if we had that kind of higher quality data, more robust data across the state, then in replicating that study, we would be able to have more insight into exactly what you're saying, the kind of disparate decisions made across the state from the ACCs. So I'd love to be able to do that. Can't tackle it right now, but if you hound Marty Hammond at GOCPP, perhaps we will have continued funding into the future that we'd be able to do that, and we'd really love to. Okay, Isabella Williams, I see your raised hand, so we're gonna give you ability to unmute. No? Okay, I think maybe that was not intended again. Yeah, okay, so from John Fellers, could you share any estimated timeframes for phase 3? Rachel, do you want to talk about your sort of estimate of time frame for 3A first?
Absolutely. So phase 3A, I'm doing interviews now. So if you'd like to be interviewed to help with the cost inventory, please feel free to reach out, or if you put your contact information in the chat or want to email me now, please do so I can interview you. We'll probably be conducting those into January. And then the data collection tool will probably be sent out, I'd say, late January, early February, so that we can get started on really doing some of that data analysis.
Thanks, Rich. As far as the 3B side of things, I think we have some upfront work that we need to do in kind of creating this outline so that there is something that sort of makes sense to all look at together and react from in the discussion groups. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now, is sort of pulling data together to create something tangible to share with you folks. So I think that we will probably have that targeted to be done around, the coming of the new year, and be looking to facilitate discussion groups in sort of early spring. We're also planning on coordinating as much between, the two halves of this project, Rachel and I, to make sure that we're not asking too much all at once at the same time, or, being unreasonable. That said, it's kind of been our assumption that there may be different folks in each agency that are kind of hold the knowledge about the financial aspect versus the kind of technical, I guess, aspects, but that may or may not be the case from place to place. So that wasn't a super specific answer to your question. But I think, I guess to recap, Rachel is looking for information right now. She's kind of doing these interviews to collect kind of preliminary thoughts about what the costs are, and then looking to reach out to kind of everyone to start collecting data in mass in January, right?
I'd say, yeah,
January,
probably, I mean,
February.
depending on the number of interviews that we get over the next December, January, it may be February. If I get a lot of interviews right now, it could be earlier. But I also wanted to mention, I don't know if we said it so far, that this project ends, and I want to say June. June. So our publications will be out by June. So that is the end date of this. So you don't have that long to wait until you get the information.
Yes, that's a good point. Thank you. There's another question. Has PERF or GOCAP received any feedback from the governor's office or legislators on the reports that we've published so far, especially the challenges identified with the Police Accountability Act? I can say PERF has not. I don't want to speak for Marty. He can address that if he wants to, but we have not. We know that it has crossed a few people's desks, just in that we've heard from some folks that we shared the report with that they have also shared it on, but I have not heard anything to my knowledge. No one at PERF has heard anything back. Let me see. Any others? Of course, you're always welcome to email us about any questions that you have. Like I put up on the screen, Rachel's kind of your primary point of contact for the financial side of the project. I'm your point of contact for the more, what am I calling it? Technical or sort of programmatic aspects.
Terminology.
Yeah, terminology, that sort of stuff. You're welcome to get in touch with any of us. It's not a big office. We all kind of sit right next to each other. So you really can't go wrong. Zoe is always a great point of contact. If you have just no idea what you're looking for, she is able to kind of facilitate where to get you to. There's another question here I see. Can you comment on the revision of legislation to reduce unnecessary burden for minor incidents to include accidents, etc.? I really can't. I mean, we included that recommendation in the report that we published in July. I'm not aware of if there is any legislation that has been introduced this year. I don't think we're not in session, right? So I don't think that would have sort of had an opportunity yet. PERF is not a policy advocacy organization in the sense of advocating for any specific legislation. We really see our role as documenting the things as they are now, and providing data. Some of the associations in the state may be interested in kind of picking up that data and moving it forward. But yeah, that's just not really PERF's role. And we don't have any plans to kind of introduce that or anything. I see, Marty, that you unmuted yourself.
Yeah,
So
I would just add that the intent was to bring all the information together so that the police agencies, the legislators, the community can come together and have those conversations. So that is the intent. And what direction they want to take that, again, I think you hit on, is leave it up to those organizations and the legislators.
Got it. Okay, yeah. So thank you for that. I am not seeing any more questions right now. You are certainly welcome to. Oh, Isabel Williams, do you have your hand up? We're gonna let you unmute if you have a question you want to ask.
Did it unmute me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. I really wanted to thank you guys for the work that you've been doing. And one recommendation that I didn't see is I would love if there was some mechanism in the legislation that allowed agencies to run some remedial processes through channels to make sure that they still were in keeping with the original legislative intent. So some of the high volume jurisdictions, like Prince George's County that has like 29 law enforcement agencies, when we're speaking with the chiefs and they want the ability to handle or resolve some of those minor infractions, one of the ideas we came up with was like a remand. So the option, if the committee votes that there's maybe not a substantial nexus between the alleged misconduct and the police action, to send that case back to the department for them to resolve it internally. And so while the ACC can agree and the department can agree, we're still not entirely sure that that is in keeping with the original legislative intent. So if there was some sort of mechanism where we could speak directly to some party or decision maker to ensure that the resolutions we're coming up with to help resolve some of these high volume issues were still in keeping with the legislative intent, that would be really helpful. Because what we find in our county is that the majority of the chiefs really do want to work with us, and they really do want to find ways to resolve this quickly for their officers. And it does take the ACC quite a bit of time because they only meet once a week. And so, if we all agree, it would just be nice if we could ask someone if that's okay. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. I think it's a great idea. Totally transparently, we PERF sort of kind of noodled on that. I hate that phrase. We thought about it a little bit when we were coming up with, like, what do we want to propose for a new project to GOCAP, and we just weren't sure how much traction we could get in inviting the legislators to engage in that process. I don't think it is by any means, a lost cause. I think there's a lot of appetite, especially on the police and ACC and PAB side, to say, like, hey, we're having to come up with some solutions because there are things that are just not addressed, and we are doing the best we can and being innovative, but is this what we're supposed to be doing, kind of thing? And that's a poor sort of summary of what you just said so well, but I think that is something we definitely have pinned for hopefully future work that we'll continue to do as long as we're able. All right. No other questions. I'm going to hang on here for another few minutes. I think that kind of wraps up our sort of formal program, so to speak. But if you have questions, again, we'll hang out for another couple of minutes. Thank you, everyone, for joining today, for being such amazing partners with us in this work. Thanks again to Marty and the whole GOCAP team, because that's what makes this machine move here. And feel free to reach out anytime. And yeah, we'll hang out. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, Captain Ott.
Hey,
Hi, Travis.
Bill.
I don't
Marty,
know if
how are
anyone is still on that knows this, but I'm just gonna brag on you because I am aware of this, that Lieutenant Ott was recently promoted to captain. So congratulations.
And I just
Thank
spoke to you 2 weeks ago, I think. So
And Captain Ott happens to be my brother's boss, so
So you have to.
Yeah,
want to keep him happy.
oh,
All right.
a bunch of
Anyway,
stuff there. Hey,
go
I
ahead,
was
Michael.
tied up and I kind of jumped on a little bit late. I see that this was recording. Is there any chance you could send that out, or at least send
Yeah.
it to me so I can catch
Yeah.
that for 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's not a problem. We can do that. If anyone else is in the same boat that is interested in a copy, we can make sure that we make it available to you. Yeah,
Cool.
no problem.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Well
Yeah,
done.
thank you.
you.
Well done.
Right.
All right. Take care.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Bye, Rachel. See you, Marty.
Hey, buddy. Kristen, I was thinking, and that's good if you're going to send that out, but
Mhm.
you might be able to those who couldn't make it or whatever, especially the surveys that you had, maybe
Yeah.
include those so you can gain more information from that, or maybe even expand upon those. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, we didn't really think about it beforehand, but we can definitely do. We can just put together like a really quick survey
in case
to kind of
you missed it,
go
right?
with it.
What you
Yeah.
missed, or in case you missed it, here's what we found, and can you contribute more? Like it was pretty close. But no, that was good.
Yeah,
Is
cool.
there anything? I see there's still 9. Oh, you'd like a copy, Teresa? I still see there's 9 people on. We're happy to provide any other questions. We can also send a
Yeah.
copy of the recording. Anything else?
I think Rachel and Zoe, we should just plan on sending out a link to the recording just to the same folks that received the invitation, our kind of general email list for this project so that we can get it to as many folks as want it.
Absolutely.
All right.
David Morris would like to give you a call.
Okay. All right, Chief. Yeah. I know you have my phone number, so you can just give me a ring when you get a chance. I'll just be right back at my desk, so no problem.
He's back to work.
And all right, I think we will go ahead and wrap up here.
Okay.
Again, thanks to the folks that hopped on. Thank you, Marty. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rachel. Thank you, Zoe.
Marty. Thanks, everybody.
You guys, if you need anything along the way, like obviously, and then we can do like periodic check-ins as well. So
Absolutely.
if we don't speak, have a good Thanksgiving.
You too. Thank
Alrighty.
you.
Thank you guys.
Have a good one with the kids and family.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.